Hey all, Tom Moran here from Tom's Big Spiders. Well, we're in the heart of summer over here in Connecticut, and as a result, the tarantula room has been quite warm, and we've been getting a lot of molt. So usually once a year or so, I take an episode to kind of look at some of the species I have that have molted, talk about their size, their growth rate, some interesting facts about them. So today we have, I think, 10 or 11 species I'm going to be taking a look at and talking about, one of which is one that some of you eagle-eyed watchers from last episode pointed out was molting right behind me while I was speaking. That is my Nandu chromatus, who is right over here. I'll be plucking that molt out in a bit, but she flipped over before I started doing my video, which I thought was pretty cool. And I was kind of curious to see how many people would spot her flipped over in the background. Well, she molted. Everything went well. So far, so good. Hoping I can start feeding her probably in a week or two after she hardens up. Anyway, really excited to show off some of these. We have a couple Phormictopus species that people have asked me about because with Phormictopus, the genus is a mess. The colors are all over the place, and it seems like daily we're being introduced to new species that might just be regular Phormictopus cancerides. Also have a couple other surprises, including one of my slowest growing tarantulas of all time. So enough of me talking. Let's take a look at some of the recent molts in Tom's Big Spider Spider Room. All right, so this is my Phormictopus chalcodes, also known as Nikki, an Arizona blonde, and as luck would have it, I literally just finished and posted my Phormictopus update video, and about 24 hours later, I walk into the tarantula room and find her flipped over in a molt. Now, what makes this kind of miraculous is that it was her first molt in over 4 years. She really doesn't grow very quickly at all. As I mentioned in my Phormictopus video, I picked her up as about a 1 3/4 inch sexed sling, and she at that time would not eat very well, would spend some time from about November to April of 3 years in a row buried, not eating, so she wasn't putting on a lot of size. And then even after she finally started molting and showing some of those adult colors, it seems like there's a lot of time in between molts. So I figured this was time to celebrate because I don't get to show this off very much with her because she just doesn't molt a lot. And as you can see, her colors are just stunning. I love the Phormictopus, and especially the Phormictopus chalcodes, just the coloration of them. I know some folks are bored by the earthy tones, but I really love that appearance of reddish hairs in the abdomen. I like how the front legs are more blonde than the back legs. That's something that looks really cool. And obviously that blondish tan carapace, just an awesome spider. Now I love this girl. I was hoping to get her first feeding on video here, but she wasn't ready to eat yet. So we'll give her a little bit of a break. And as you can see, she actually hides from me. Normally she's one that comes charging out when I open up the container. So we'll get that first feed in, unfortunately, later on. And next up, we have a C. cyaneopubescens, or the green bottle blue, or the GBB. I actually raised up 2 slings. They turned out to be female and sadly passed away last year. They were both about 10 and 11 years old each, so very old females. And with that in mind, I decided I really wanted to raise this species up again. And so as you can see here, I have this sling that I picked up last summer, almost exactly a year ago. She's been growing great, starting to show some of the adult colors, the green on the femurs, that orange booty, and I love the gold carapace. One thing that I forgot about with this species, because it had been so long, is just how truly stunning they are as slings. They're one of the few slings that you can raise up that are beautiful in every stage of their development. So this one here now is probably right around 2 1/4 or 2.5 inches or so. I'm guessing with her next molt, that'll bring even more of those adult colors. But I'm in no rush because I'm loving the way this one looks. Now, a couple things about the green bottle blue, or the GBBs. A lot of folks are still keeping them too moist. I've gotten the last couple weeks, a couple of people contact me saying they didn't know why they seem to be all scrunched up in a corner. And when I looked at the setups, the substrate was very, very moist. These guys, when they first came out, folks were keeping them moist. They were dropping like flies. And then we realized they don't need moist substrate. I know we usually say most slings need moist substrate. What I will normally do is moisten a corner of the enclosure. So I'll keep a little bit of it moist. But more importantly, a couple times a week, I'll dribble some water on the webbing. And I've seen them come up and drink right from the webbing. You can also give them a water dish, and I've seen them drink from that. But this isn't a species you want to go over the top on, even as teeny tiny slings, giving them super moist substrate, little moist corner, mostly dry, some water water on the webbing, they do fine. And as you can see, they love the web. They love to web up. This is one that gives people fits because some of us will refer to them as semi-arboreal, meaning more than anything, you just want to give them more height than your average terrestrial, and people freak out because they're not an arboreal species, although there are many photos of them out there in their natural habitat up several feet off the ground in trees. So let that one rattle around the brain a little bit. But anyway, awesome spiders. One of the species out there that are, it's a New World species, but they have those bright colors because a lot of people get into the hobby. They love the blues, the greens, the golds, the oranges. They eat great, they grow quickly, and they do a copious amount of webbing. Both of my females had completely, utterly covered their entire enclosures with webbing before they pass. Awesome species. Here's one of my favorite girls in my collection. This is my adult female, Harpactira pulchripes, or the golden blue leg baboon. I've had this girl for a long time. I picked her up as a sexed female. She was about 2.5, 2 3/4 inches way back in the summer of 2015. At that time, these guys were just kind of introduced to the hobby, and they were super expensive. And this was, at the time, the most I had ever paid for a sling. I was usually rather cheap and avoided the expensive ones, but I knew there were going to be people out there that wanted care information on them, and so I really wanted to get one, grow it up, and be able to talk about it. And as luck would have it, I got a sling at the same time, raised that one up. That one was a mature male, and obviously we have the sex female here. Now, one thing I do want to point out about these guys is a lot of times on Instagram and other social media platforms, you'll see pictures where people will really jack up the levels. Now, I will say, juveniles are the brightest in my experience with them. Juveniles will have more of that bright electric blue coloration on their legs, a more golden overall coloration on the bodies. But as the adult females get older, things dull out just a hair. As you can see, this is still a beautiful spider, and I actually love the more muted tones. Under the right leg light, those blues will pop a little bit more, that gold will pop a little bit more. But awesome spiders overall. So just a heads up there, because I've had folks that have picked up adult females or ordered adult females, they get them in, and they're like, I don't understand, these don't look a thing like the Instagram pictures. Well, sometimes, unfortunately, people like to exaggerate what they look like, and they jack up the saturation a little bit. And although that looks cool, I think these guys look just as good. But this girl here is easily one of my most laid-back tarantulas. I've received exactly one threat pose from her, and that was because she was sitting there kind of in her tarantula standby mode, and I dropped a cricket in, and the cricket bounced right off of her carapace. And I got a little threat posture, and that was about it. But as you can see here, this is her old molt, and you can see those colors popping a little bit more. They really, under the right light, I love those blues because it almost looks like metallic plating. There's almost like a black outline around them. It really makes them extra striking than just your normal full blue tarantula legs. But this girl here, always out and about. You can see copious amounts of webbing. She's been webbing up this enclosure for quite some time, and she did have a hide to start off with. I dug it out, gave her a little starter burrow, and she never used it. She basically webbed it right up, and as you can see, just blankets of webbing everywhere. But right now, after this molt, she's right around 5. The molt was right around 5 inches, so I'm guessing she's probably about 5 1/4 inches or so. I'm hoping I have her for a good many years still, because she, again, is just such a delight to keep. And I should add that this species gets my vote for being one of the best starter old world species for folks moving into keeping old worlds. Now, this one here was a wonderful surprise. This is my Phormictopus species blue, and I should probably put the blue in quotes because, as you can see by the common name, I don't think this is one of the species blues. I picked this one up way back in 2015, late 2015, as a 3.5-inch sexed female. She also came with a 2.5-inch sexed male, and my goal at the time was to eventually pair them. At that time, both of the specimens were showing just the slightest bluish sheen to their lower legs. That was about it. They had she had a pink carapace. The male, when he matured out, was this brilliant green and gold color. Just one of the most beautiful males I've ever had. I was completely shocked because, again, I was expecting, well, blue because of the common name, but he wasn't blue. And unfortunately, he ended up maturing out long before the female was ready to pair, and he died before I got the chance to pair them. But the female here, as she's grown older, she's picked up more greens. As you can see there on her femurs, there's a greenish coloration. However, if you look at the carapace, it's almost got a purple, which really makes it an interesting looking spider. And that's something new. The last time she molted out, she looked almost like what is being sold today as Phormictopus species full green. The carapace kind of had green tones on it. Her legs had green, the same green you can see there. But I don't know what she is, and sadly, I will probably never know. But it doesn't matter because I absolutely love this spider. Now, with the last molt, she put on about a half an inch or so. It looks like she's about 8.5 inches now, 8.5 inches around that mark. And this is one of the ones that, and I found this with other Phormictopus as well, once they hit their adult sizes, they can go a long time between molts. After this one molted, I went back to check my records to see when the last time she molted was, and it was about 4 years ago. So she went 4 years between molts. That's quite a long time, but I'm willing to wait if every time she molts, she puts on some unique or different colors. And I have to say, I'm really digging those purplish tones against the green legs. Now, one thing with this one that I found very interesting is a lot of my Phormictopus species will basically eat until they go into pre-molt, and at that time, they're usually quite chubby, quite fat. This one here stopped eating about 2 years ago, hadn't eaten since, and actually lost some size on her abdomen to the point where I was a little concerned that she might be on her way out, only because when I got her, she was 3.5 inches, but I had no idea how old she was. And I'm assuming now that she might have been wild caught. I don't know. But obviously, no issues. She molted out fine. Here you can see she's actually taking her first meal. I dropped a couple red runner roaches in. She'll be getting a big fat juicy dubia later on. But there you go, my supposed Phormictopus species blue. All right, and here we have my Tarantula lugardi, or Fort Hall baboon, but wait for it, there are more common names. It's also referred to as the Dodoma baboon, the Tanzanian blonde baboon, and the fart hall baboon. Okay, one of those is not real, but this is why common names can sometimes be silly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's an awesome spider, and this is one I specifically picked up because I was looking to put together a video talking about some of the best starter old world species or beginner old world species. And I don't mean starting with an old world as a beginner. I mean species that are good for making that transition into keeping the old world spiders. And this one kept getting mentioned over and over and over again, which when I first heard it was kind of surprising considering its cousin, Tarantula miranus, or the OBT, is infamous for being one that's not good for beginners. But I can say these guys, this one here and my other one, have been really, really easygoing spiders overall. Granted, obviously temperament can always differ from specimen to specimen. So although mine may be calm, yours may not be, but mine have been pretty good overall. One of them I've rehoused into one of the barbarous growth enclosures. It's about 10 inches by 8 inches by 9 inches, and it carved itself a beautiful little burrow that it webbed up the top, almost like a trap door. It's not quite there, but it is difficult to see the entrance. It's always kind of webbed up, and I have seen it burst from the webbing and grab it. This one here just molted. This is its sling container. I will be putting this one into a similar container as soon as she gets a couple feeds in her. But as you can see, gorgeous little spider. You can definitely see the resemblance to the OBT, but I think these guys have a couple common names because, as you can see, mine here is more of a greenish brown coloration. There are other ones that are more brownish, tan, blonde. I've had people contact me, go, I think I have the wrong species here because it doesn't seem to be the gold or the tan color that most people have. I've seen gray ones. There seems to be a lot of variation in coloration with this one, but it doesn't matter. It's an awesome spider nonetheless. Now, growth rate, this one's been a little bit slower. This one here is right about 3 inches, and it's been about 2.5 years since I got it. So moving a little bit slower, but they eat great. They grow fairly quickly, and the best part about it is, again, they're not particularly high strung, which is awesome. And here we have my Poecilotheria miranda, or Bengal ornamental. I picked this one up about 1.5 years ago at around 2 inches. So as you'll see in a moment, the shipping dram vial that it came in is also in the enclosure because I chose to put her directly into her juvenile enclosure. This enclosure here is about 8 by 8 by about 9.5 inches tall or so. I love these for my juvenile arboreals. But anyway, really loving the spider. My goal is to eventually have kept every species of Poecilotheria that are available, and this was a glaring omission in my collection for quite some time, so I was happy to get one. Hoping this one ends up to be a female, but as with most Poecilotheria species, when she first started out, she kind of came out of that little dram vial there, went behind the cork bark, did some webbing, and kind of hid in there, and every once in a while, I would catch her out and about sitting on that cork bark like a true arboreal. That's one of the things that tends to freak people out with some of the Poecilotheria species is a lot of them hide at first. They don't exercise those arboreal tendencies until they put on some size. However, this one has been out quite a bit, and I've caught quite a few pictures of her. As a matter of fact, I think I posted one up on Instagram not that long ago where she just kind of sat right out in the open, and I got some good shots of her, which was great. And even before I started shooting this video, she was out and about and standing right out in the open, which is fantastic because Poecilotheria, I think personally, are some of the most beautiful spiders out there. I've often said that there's like tarantulas and then there's the Poecilotheria species because there's something just so regal about their appearances. But this one here, really hoping again to get a female, excited to grow it up. It's been eating well, growing fairly quickly overall, not quite as fast as some of my other Poecilotheria species like my vittata or my regalis, but she's definitely put on some size. She was out on the side of the enclosure and I was able to get a good measurement on her, and she's about 4 inches now. So that next molt will bring that 5 inches or so. And hopefully at that point, I'll be able to ventrally sex her through the plastic. At that point, I'll also probably be giving her her adult enclosure, but loving the species, loving growing her up. I've also got some Poecilotheria ornatas that unfortunately, although they just molted, were a bit camera shy that I would have loved to show off, but this one will have to suffice for folks who are looking to see some Poecilotheria species. And here we have my Ceratogyrus darlingi, or rear horn baboon. I actually have 2 adult females. This one here will be getting a rehousing very soon, probably into something about 8 by 8 by 12 inches. That's what I have her sister in. She does great in that because this is a burrowing species. They're a fossorial species. They love to burrow. They will create deep burrows, web up on the top, sometimes have multiple entrances. Now, just a heads up, that water dish there has not been in use for quite some time. Usually what I do is I drop a brand new water dish into it. I had just plucked out another water dish that she had flipped over, and I added it in afterwards. So I don't want people to think she didn't have water. Now, this one here is in an old critter keeper type enclosure, but as I said, she's going to be getting moved. And honestly, what's cooler than a tarantula with a horn? That little foveal horn on the back that slopes backward is what gives this species its name. I have always had a soft spot in my heart for the Ceratogyrus species, only because I saw pictures of them years ago when I first started looking into keeping tarantulas, and I honestly thought that the horn was fake or photoshopped on at first. I think somebody had posted up a funny little meme or something of that nature, and it said unicorn tarantula, and I thought, oh, cute, look at, they put a horn on it. And it was only several months later when I was doing research that I figured out that no, that horn is actually real. The other species that I have that has a horn right now is Ceratogyrus marshalli, or the straight horn baboon, a cousin of this one. Both of them make it onto beginner old world species list. We talked earlier about a lot of folks want to move into old worlds. They want a species that is not going to be so much of a handful. And this is one of the ones that can fit that bill. I found that mine, although they are fossorial species and create those burrows, they're very, very visible. As you can see here, this one here does have a burrow in there, but she's out in the top. My other one, as I mentioned before, has about, looking over at her now, maybe 9 inches of substrate, a burrow that goes all the way down to the bottom. And as I look over at her cage right now, she's sitting right on top in the webbing. And the best part is some of the old world species, if they're caught out up top, can be a bit defensive. They can throw up a threat posture. They can run. These guys generally just sit there, or if they're bothered, they'll just slowly turn around and go into their burrows, which has been awesome. But I love feeding these guys. They have awesome feeding responses. I'll usually toss in 2 or 3 crickets or red runner roaches at a time and watch them scarf them down. And then I'll just sit there and stare at them and marvel at those little black horns they have on their carapace. It's just so cool. So Ceratogyrus marshalli, awesome little spider. And one of those ones I think is honestly, at this point, almost a hobby staple. So I'm so excited to be able to show off this species here. This is my Phormictopus arboricola, or Borneo black. For those of you that watch my channel or listen to my podcast, you'll know that years ago, this one actually had a death scare where I opened up her enclosure. She was out of her burrow. This is a species, although arboreal, when they're younger, will burrow, and she looked half dead. And I took her out. She didn't look good. I put her on some moist paper towels. I'm not a big fan of the tarantula ICU, but I was worried that she was dehydrated, but it didn't look like it was a dehydration thing. She took months, wouldn't eat, wasn't moving very much. It was to the point where I was considering euthanasia. And then one day I dropped a cricket in and she scarfed down the cricket. And I was so excited. And I dropped another one. She scarfed that one down. So she continued to eat and then she stopped eating again. And I was really worried something was wrong with her. Nope. She molted. After that, she was completely back to her old self. We rehoused her into this 8 by 8 by 12 inch Exoterra, and she's been doing great ever since. And the other day I came up, looked into her enclosure. She was looking very lethargic. I was a little worried after that last scare we had with her years ago. However, then I saw that she was right there. You can see where that old molt was. She was weathing herself up a little molt mat. So I'm like, oh, good. We have a molt coming. So she molted. It went great. I twice tried to catch her out because she'll go up and hang off of that cork bark and kind of stretch out, do some tarantula yoga as she gets used to her new skin. But every time I'd go to open her enclosure to get some pictures of her, she'd scramble behind and enter her burrow and disappear. Well, on this particular day, luck was with me. I opened it up carefully, and as you can see, she sat there and posed for quite a bit, which was awesome. So I actually got some good footage of her, and I'm glad because I don't get to show this one off all that often. She does stay out in the open quite a bit lately, which has been great. If I come up in the morning, she's out in the open. But again, anytime I bump that enclosure, she disappears again. But if you love black tarantulas, if you love sleek black tarantulas, just check this one out here. She's a beautiful ebony beauty. And here we have another Phormictopus species. This is my Phormictopus species, Bayahibe, or Phormictopus cancerides Bayahibe, the Bayahibe purple. I picked these up a few years back because I heard they were a new purple species in the hobby. And as you can see there, well, that one is showing some purple on her femurs, although the body is more of a golden bronze. I will be completely honest, when I look at this one, it looks a lot like a normal Phormictopus species. However, it seems to be the general consensus is that they do develop that purple later on. There's a lot of pictures out there of folks that have their Bayahibe that are all grown up, that sport those beautiful purple tones all over their legs, their carapace. Now, this one here is still a bit young. She's probably about 4 inches or so. So I'll be curious to see if the next molt brings that purple. However, I will say the sister that I have to her, at least I hope it's a sister, molted recently, and that one has much more purple on her. That one's much more profound violet on the femurs and even a little bit of purple on the carapace. So we'll have to see. I am wondering, because these are now labeled Phormictopus cancerides species Bayahibe, if it's one of just the regular color forms of the cancerides. There's a lot of color variants. I know when I first got into the hobby or first got into Phormictopus species, I picked up cancerides first, and then a lot of folks were selling what was called Phormictopus species purple. So I picked up 3 of the species purples. They have since grown up. They are adults, and none of them are purple. 2 of them look exactly like your standard everyday P. cancerides. One of the other ones actually has some purple on her, but it just makes me think that it's a regular color variant or just something they get, different colors they get during different stages in their life cycle or molting process. I had 2 other P. cancerides that I raised up, and I will tell you that they went through stages where one of them did not look at all like the other one, even though they were the same age, and it just depended upon which molt they were on. So time will tell. The Phormictopus genus is an absolute disaster. And unfortunately, as they get more popular, more people are pulling them out of the wild, slapping on the species wherever the location was where they found them, and selling them for exorbitant amounts of money as new species. Time will tell what we actually have here. And here we have another Phormictopus species. This is Phormictopus species green or full green, or kind of full green, I guess I should say, because after the last molt, it lost a lot of the green on its carapace and on its chelicera. Before the last molt it had, which was just about a week ago, it was completely green. Well, actually, it turned brown. These guys do get kind of drab when they need a molt. But after the last molt, it turned full green. It was a beautiful spider. And now it looks like it's picking up some gold, almost purplish tones on its carapace and some gold on its claricera. And it's funny because earlier I was doing the narration for the Phormictopus species blue and mentioning how the color looked different than any of the greens I have. And now I look at this one and they look very similar. The one thing I can say is that the species blue went through many, many years where it didn't have a spot of green on it and did have some kind of bluish coloration on its legs. So I don't think they're the same species. But who knows? This, again, is the problem with Phormictopus. It's such a disaster. There is the Phormictopus species full green, Phormictopus species green femur, Phormictopus species green gold carapace. And who knows if they haven't been mixed in the hobby? Who knows if they're their own individual species or just color variants from different locations or locales? But I don't care. This spider is absolutely gorgeous. I love the color green, and any spider that has any green on it, I'm going to immediately like. This one has gotten quite large. I measured its molt. Its molt was right around 7 3/4 inches or so. So this one's probably pushing 8 inches, which makes it a very big spider. That's the one good surprise I've gotten from keeping Phormictopus species is when I first got into them, there was a lot of discussion about just how large they got, with folks saying that 8 was kind of on the large size of things. But I will say the vast majority of mine have hit that 8-inch mark with no problem. But awesome spider. I have another one that's currently in pre-molt that's a little smaller than this one. We'll have to see what happens with her colors after she molts. And last but certainly not least, here we have my Grammostola rosea, or rose-haired tarantula, actually looking a bit like an adult Grammostola rosea, which has me ecstatic because this might be one of the slowest growing tarantulas I have ever raised. I picked this one up way back in 2011. At that time, she was a little 1/3 of an inch sling. I put her in one of those AMAC box enclosures with some substrate, and she sat there for quite a while, seemingly refusing to grow. She actually did this strange thing where she did some digging, built a little mound up against the cork bark, and would sit on the top of the cork bark almost like an arboreal. As far as feeding her was concerned, I was doing a lot of pre-killed. Sometimes she'd eat, sometimes she wouldn't, which is a normal trait of the Grammostola rosea or Grammostola porteri species, that they'll sometimes fast. And when she molted, she seemed to put on very little size with each molt. And it's funny because when I first picked this one up, it was when the queen was, she was getting up there, and I was concerned that someday she was going to pass away and I wouldn't have another Grammostola rosea or porteri to take her place. So I picked this one up. Well, the queen has long passed, unfortunately, but at least this one is finally showing some of those colors. Now, just to show how slow growing she is, her last molt was about 2.5 years ago, and although she may look like a large specimen there, she's actually only right around 3 inches now. So in 12 years, she's only grown about 3 inches, which is really, really slow. Now, the good news is, in a moment here, we're actually going to get to catch her first feed after a molt, which is kind of awesome because, honestly, this is one that's been a very, very shy eater for me. More often than not, she will not eat in front of me. If I drop a prey item in front of her, she will kind of scurry away from it and pretend like she's afraid of it, only to go back and grab it later on when I'm not watching. So I was super excited to actually see when I dropped this roach in to feed her that she snatched it right up, which is awesome. So we'll see how it goes from this point on. Sometimes once they hit that 3-inch mark, they start putting on decent size with each molt after that. I'm kind of hoping that's the case with this one because I would love to see a big beefy adult at some point. I'm saying her, I have not sexed this one out. This is one that I'm almost afraid to right now because after spending 12 years growing her up, I'm a little worried that I might get a male out of it. Something's telling me it's going to be a lady. Fingers crossed that holds true. But here we go. And she's becoming one of my favorites in my collection, if only because of the fact that she's taken so darn long to grow. I've grown super attached to it. It's become a running joke in the house because when this one molts, it's like a super event that we need to celebrate. So Grammostola rosea, awesome little spider, and probably the slowest growing I have. So hopefully you enjoyed that. I had a couple other ones I wanted to feature, one being my Aphanopelma simani, but for the life of me, I couldn't get her to come out long enough for me to get any footage. I was excited, though, however, to get my P. aboricola. That one was quite elusive. It took me a few tries, so when I was finally able to get some somewhat decent footage of her, I was ecstatic because I really wanted to show her off. That's one that if you go back through the old videos, you'll see that she went through a really rough patch there. We didn't think that she was going to make it. She did, and she's done great ever since. And Since doing this video and putting it together, I've already had a couple other species molted, so maybe we'll do another one at the end of summer to update. I'll get some of these other guys or some footage of them. But I think that's the most fun part about the summer for me, is watching all these specimens that have not been molted in quite some time actually finally go shed their skin and see what colors they sport. I know with Phormictopus species, it seems like it's a surprise every time, so when one of them molts, I get extra excited. So that will do it for this one. As always, if you liked it enough to subscribe, you can click the little circle up in there. If you want to check out more of my videos, see what I'm about, I'll put them over in here. If you take the time to comment, I'll take the time to respond. Just know it can take me a couple of days. Guys, stay safe. Catch you all next time.